hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki, and on Street Talk we did the political, social, and economics here in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. Now, joining me tonight,
Dennis Burnside.
And
Paget Maynard.
All right, man. We've got a lot to talk about, but today is Columbus Day?
Well, it's Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay, all right.
Because they're trying to gild the lily and recognize who Columbus really was, while still giving his Italian and for that matter, American believers of mythology a day to celebrate Columbus.
Okay.
I say for the Italians to adhere to Columbus Day as a reason for celebration really is something that passes or skips my understanding of logic.
Okay.
Yes, he was of Italian descent,
Mm-hmm.
but he worked for the Portuguese and the Spanish crown.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the Iberian Peninsula, which is primarily Spain, but also a small segment of it is Portugal,
Mm-hmm.
He worked for those two crowns because at that time, in fact, literally in 1492,
Mm-hmm.
is when the transatlantic slave trade was codified.
Yes. Yes.
And Columbus, knowing how to sail and knowing that there was a landmass to the west of Europe and Africa,
Mm-hmm.
because at one time he was a trader and a explorer of West Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and he had his navigators, many of them who were African
Yep,
men,
yep.
tell him about this
Yeah.
landmass to the west.
Yep.
In fact, one of his key navigators in his first initial voyage was a black man
Mm-hmm.
from West Africa, what we
Yep.
would now call Ghana.
Yep.
And the whole time he was a double agent. He was supposedly working for Spain,
Mm-hmm.
but he was keeping double books for Portugal
Mm-hmm.
and taking money from them too.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended his life in prison for those crimes. So he really wasn't a man of
honor,
ethics and honor, just by the way he conducted business, but more importantly, and I think more to the point about why anyone who's melanated should look at Columbus Day as a day of recognition for a mass murderer. He went to the Caribbean, as Paget has said many times. He never made it to the United States, what we now call the United States of America.
Yeah.
His exploration was confined merely to what we now call the Caribbean islands. And there he wiped out most of the indigenous population of Arawak Indians through disease, smallpox and other diseases that the Europeans carried, but also brutality. One of the early interactions he had with the Arawaks was to understand that they knew of gold. They had a little bit of ceremonial gold. They also had spears, which they said were traded from black men that came from the southeast.
Right.
And that was later examined and the Crown found that those spears were made the same way and comprised of the same material that came from West African trade. So we know that there are African men there. But anyway, between the dogs of war, spears, swords, mass suicide, and disease, they pretty much wiped out the indigenous people in just a few short years. In fact, less than a generation, most of those people were dead and gone. So that's the man that we have had a holiday for most of the existence of the United States.
The thing about it is that I remember in grade school, it's like, come to find out, the closest man got to the U.S. was Cuba.
Yeah.
That's, I mean,
90 miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As close he got to the U.S. Patrick, is Cuba. You know.
But you know, the whole thing is, this man is still being touted as the great discoverer.
Yeah.
Now, so much was going on. They didn't know about the Africans coming out to these parts, and years before Columbus. You know, so a lot is still amiss in the history. We still need to have the history books corrected, because students are hearing all kinds of things except the truth.
Well, I don't believe, and you don't believe, and Dennis don't believe, they're going to ever correct these history books, because the thing about it is that the is set in, it is like right now in Texas, they were trying to change some of the books in Texas, and instead of changing the books, they'll get more strict in everything on the books, and most of the books come from Texas, don't it?
Yeah, when you look at the publication of school books, they look at the states that generate the large orders based on population, and because of that, Texas, with their specifications that they demand for the school books, influence large parts of the country, because if you're going to make all these for Texas, you pass them on to smaller, less populous states. So they lie. You know, one of the objectives of the Texas book story is they want to eliminate discussions of enslavement.
Yeah.
They want to eliminate discussions of the mass murders of the indigenous people here in the what we now call the United States. They want to sanitize Jim Crow and make it sound as if it was a necessary step in the civilization of these uncivilized people. You know, they want to make the civil rights movement sound as if it was a decision that was reached by reasonable minds, both black and white, to give these uncivilized Negroes a modicum of freedom and rights, because they're a little more civilized than used to be. It's a complete whitewashing, but that's history.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of the world as told by white supremacy, Western civilization, they completely whitewash history. They insinuate themselves into situations where they were not even there.
Right.
You know, you could go to movies like movies on the mythical Moses, or anything that had to do with Kemet, renamed Egypt by the Greeks. You can see that they try to make the people who built the Nile Valley into well-tanned Europeans, but they always have a few dark melanated people to act as slaves and servants. So it's a way to keep the cultural myth alive. And Columbus Day is just another example of the mythology of Western civilization, not a true historical accounting of Western civilization.
Right.
So Columbus was, first of all, he was no explorer. He had maps. He was looking for gold and valuable booty to bring back, which he was going to take a cut of. But he was a mass murderer.
Yeah.
Let's call the man what he was. He's a mass murderer, a killer, and a thief. That's what Columbus was. And the Italians, if they are taking pride in this man, that's on them. But I would have to ask the question, if he's so important to you, how come he didn't bring back any of this knowledge and financial booty that he was gathering
Right.
to Italy?
Right.
It was only in the Iberian Peninsula,
Yeah.
Spain and Portugal,
Mhm.
which again, in 1492, the Roman Catholic Pope, who by the way was within the borders of Italy at the Vatican,
Yeah.
codified the transatlantic slave trade into existence by saying, you have what we now call Brazil, Portugal. The rest of it goes to Spain, and we're going to give you permission to enslave Africans because they're animals
Yeah.
and less than human anyway.
Yep.
So use them as your back
Yeah.
as your backbreakers. That's who the Italians are so proud of, and I just don't understand that.
I don't either. Patrick.
You know, this thing we are calling history, it's not history if you're not going to tell the truth. It's his lie, somebody's lie. Why is it that those who are responsible are not allowing the children in school to hear and learn and know the truth? Is it because politically it suits them? Is it a means of keeping you in ignorance to control you? What is it?
Patrick.
Why are they doing that?
Patrick, look, if, and I'm not saying we would or whatever, but right now, and you know, ever since I've been reading a book, you know, look, the people who are printing these books and all the other information, hey, they don't care about what we think and all of that, you know. They're going to put what they want and the majority of them won't. That's all they think about, you know, and making money. They don't care anything about anything else.
Well, and it's a little bit deeper than that. Money is the ultimate objective, of course, but it's also a way to write yourself into a story that you had nothing to do with. Again, let's go back to Africa. And not just the Nile Valley. We have found archaeological evidence of cities in West Africa, what we now call Niger, Mali, Nigeria, Ghana, with cities that had walls around them that were 10, 12,000 square miles around a huge metropolis.
Yeah.
There's one city found in Central Africa that was so large that if it was duplicated, it would go from New York City all the way down south of Philadelphia to the outskirts of Washington, D.C., in a large metropolitan area. These people had architecture, they had construction capabilities, they had mathematical understanding that we just don't have today. But rather than tell people about that story, just ignore it.
Yeah.
You ignore the fact that Pythagoras went to Kemet, Egypt, to learn, studied 22 years, and was sent away saying, you reached the limits of your intellectual capacity. We can't teach you anything beyond this because it's above your head. And now he's called the father of mathematics because of the Pythagoras theorem, which is used to build pyramids that existed and were built thousands of years before Europe had governments. They were tribal. You had examples of cities, universities, scientific, mathematical, astronomical accomplishments that existed at a time when London and Paris were both backwater towns with a few thousand people there. Where meanwhile these vibrant, huge metropolises are existing that have high levels of civilization. Why aren't we taught that? Because if you teach people that, then you have to explain to your children, both black, white, red, and yellow, why did you take those same brilliant people and murder them en masse, put them in slaves, beat, rape, and enslave them, work them to death? under the auspices that they're inferior and intellectually undeveloped, and we're doing them a favor.
Right.
They obviously knew the truth.
Right.
Some of them did.
Yeah.
Most Americans don't, both black and white,
Oh,
know
yeah.
that history because black people are willingly ignorant.
Yeah.
You know, you give them white Jesus, they're fine.
Yeah.
But the answer to your question is it doesn't suit their needs to
Right.
tell the truth.
Right.
It's easier to foment a lie, to cover up past
Yeah.
misdeeds, than to tell the
Yeah,
truth.
and then keep telling lies.
Of course, than to tell the truth.
Which means that in order to appear, and I'm not going to say they are, but to appear as if they are indeed superior, they have to subjugate you. And by all of this subjugation, they begin to look brighter. Now they have all the say, and you are just the followers. Not even good followers. You are just the slaves.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
And if now we have programs in universities, black studies. What would it take to get some of these professors of black studies, African American studies, women studies, all of these things that they talk about? What is it going to take to get them together to formulate a curriculum that could be followed in the schools? And whether the school wants to do it or not, you find a way to teach it to your kids, to our black kids, to our Hispanic kids, our whatever other kids, because they have a right to know.
Well, the thing about it is that when they closed down Malcolm X school and the other school, before they closed these schools down, these kids were brilliant. You know, they were brilliant. I forget how many times they had won the best thing in Michigan for, you know. But until you can get that, you're going to get the same thing, because the books and things, the books are not gonna cover.
I get it.
Well, there have been, in the United States, there has been efforts at the highest level to teach the truth about our existence. There was a gentleman by the name of William Leo Hansberry, who is the architect and the father of black studies here in the United States. At Howard University, in the late 20s, early 1930s, he started teaching his students about the true history of Africa. Out of his efforts came John Henrik Clark. Out of his efforts came Kaba Kamene, many of the people that would, James Smalls, who else could I name? His name, I just saw him a few weeks ago in Detroit. His name is escaping me at the moment. But you saw blossoming out of that initial information, teaching the truth about the Nile Valley, about Nubia, about Kush, about Central, South, and West Africa, that started the blossoming of black studies that still exist to this day. But if you look at the resistance Mr. Hansberry had at the beginning, you had professors and administrators at Howard University, a historically black college, one of the jewels of the HCBU systems, object and resist what he had to teach, because they could see that this is going to impact theological thought. This is going to impact political thought. This is going to impact how our children see themselves based on what they've been taught all their lives, and is that what we really want? So there was resistance from black people about being told the truth about black people. So it's no surprise to me that to this very day, you see people who would rather adhere to the myth of European white supremacy, as opposed to hearing the truth about their own existence, because they have skin in the game.
Yeah, because, you know, another thing, it reminds me of Booker T. Washington, you know. People during this time, there was guys saying, you know, we should do this and this, and Booker T saying, no, we should stay in the South and do this. You know.
Well, he had an ideology that said we have to be practical.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to farm. We have to learn how to subsist based on what we raise, grow, and trade ourselves
And that
for
had a lot of
ourselves.
value.
And that was a time during Jim Crow where that was a rational viewpoint. At the same time, simultaneously, you had Dr. Du Bois,
Yeah.
who emphasized something that I thought was anathema to how I see the world, and he talked about the talented tip. You know, the upper 10% of African Americans should be the leaders and the examples for the rest, and pull them along gradually until they can become as intellectually and in business advances as the talented tip. Neither one. And their rival ideologies, neither one of them truly encompassed the understanding of our history and how we came to be where we are. But they were attempts. So, you know, you have a lot of people who look at, they call Booker T. Washington, Uncle Tom, and the cell. I don't see it that way. I just see that as a man who had limited historical understanding, but he had some very practical understanding with respect to agricultural and engineering endeavors, and he did his best with what he had, and you know, he built a great school. So I admire the man. I just don't agree with his perspective. Same as with Dr. Du Bois and his talented 10th ideology. I think that was a little bit condescending and limiting to the average black person.
You were saying, Pat.
Do you believe, if given the opportunity, all these so-called low-level, less than human kind of thing, do you believe that if given the opportunity, they can rise up to prove that they have the ability to learn, to think, to reason, and to accomplish?
Oh, of course. Well, here's a simple way to put it. Understanding that all human beings, I don't care what the phenotype, what your geographical location, you all come from the same common ancestor. There's no polygenesis. There's a monogenesis. We all came from the evolution of primates that evolved into several different types of human beings, all of which are extinct now except for Homo sapiens sapien. And all of those people, I don't care if you're in the whitest part of Russia or the blackest part of Zimbabwe, you had those common ancestors that came from the foot of the mountain of the moon, aka Mount Kilimanjaro. So my point is, wherever you are in the world, whatever potential you may have has already preceded you. So you have ancestors who did great things mathematically. You have ancestors who did great things scientifically. You have ancestors who did great things with writing and music and law. So of course it's within them. Of course it's within the most bereft of resources, poor black child anywhere in America, and that's the reason why you see so much creativity and newfound cultural milestones coming out of the African American community, no matter how segregated, no matter how ill-educated, no matter how criticized and reviled, we still create and we set the cultural milestones for the culture. Words like cool and hip and dis and music and poetry, it comes from us. So of course these children have the ability to learn. First thing they have to be taught is that you're brilliant, objectively speaking. There's nobody out here who you have to take a back seat to, and then they need to have those opportunities availed of them.
So you're endorsing the idea of educating the people.
Of course. Education is indispensable.
Thank you.
All people, including the people in Texas who are being told that the slaves were happy and jolly and appreciative of being pulled out of Africa. We need to tell the truth about that.
We got a few more minutes. Let's talk about what's happening Saturday, reparation. We're going to be talking about reparation and Dr. King and Malcolm X.
Where?
At the east side of the Capitol building. East side steps at the Capitol building, downtown Lansing, from 12 to 2. And
this Saturday, that's the 16th, right?
The 16th.
October 16th.
And there will be, from what I hear from Miss Taylor, there will be people, other people speaking, and from what I heard from Dr. Willard Davids, it's gonna be things talked about that's probably not in the reparation rate there, but we don't mind. You know, we got 2 hours. We got from 12 to 2, and hey, we'll throw it in.
Well, let's just throw a quick number out there for comparison. If you're talking about reparations and what is owed.
Okay.
When the Haitian Revolution occurred and you had enslaved Africans overthrow their French enslavers, defeated the French, then defeated the Spanish, then defeated the English, then defeated the French again under Napoleon, France regarded Haiti as their most valuable asset anywhere in the world.
Okay.
And in 1823, they were threatening another invasion of Haiti, which had been isolated and embargoed and was beginning its descent into dire poverty that still exists today. And they extorted from the people of Haiti the equivalent of $200 billion for having the temerity of freeing themselves and taking away their labor and intellectual property away from the French people. So if that one small island was worth $200 billion over a little over 100 years, because it finally wasn't paid off until 1947 during World War II.
Yep.
Imagine what the reparations are owed for the United States to its formerly enslaved people, and all the way through Jim Crow. The numbers in the trillions. That type of recompense is owed and is direly needed, and it's one thing that could help us break this cycle of poverty in slums that so many of our people live in.
Right. You were saying, Patrick?
Oh no, it's just a matter of taking the time to look into it, pass out the information as best we can, and if we have to use this program more often to do that, let's go ahead with it.
Well, we'll be talking about reparation. We'll be talking about reparation for the next 5-10 years, because until it gets settled, we're going to be talking about it. My name is Ahmad Shakaraka, and we catch you right down in the next block. Peace.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.